Hello and welcome to the In Publishing podcast. Our guest this week is Peter Johns, publisher and managing director at WW Magazines, whose titles include Waterways World and Self-Build and Design. We would like to thank our podcast sponsor, Acorn Web Offset, the Yorkshire-based specialist A5 and A4 magazine printer. With high-speed web offset and sheet-fed printing, together with in-house saddle stitching, perfect binding and mailing services, Acorn can cope with the most demanding of production turnarounds. Acorn prides itself on its efficiency and low-cost print production. For more information, visit acornweb.co.uk. Peter Johns is Managing Director of WW Magazines, the Burton-on-Trent-based publisher of specialist magazines including Waterways World and Self-Build and Design. Peter, welcome to the In Publishing podcast.
Thank you very much.
Firstly, I'd like to talk about how you came to head up a specialist magazine publisher. Can you tell us about your journey in publishing to where you are now?
I think like many people, you sort of stumble into these things. I trained originally as an economist, had a few years working in a university setting as an economist, got a little bit fed up with that, cast around for something, finished up working as a commissioning editor for an academic book publisher. And to cut a long story short, there were one or two little moves along the way, but my wife was, her father was a shareholder in a small magazine publishing business that published Waterways World and a magazine called Ships Monthly. And with a bit of shuffling around, the ownership structure changed, and my father-in-law decided that he would like me to run the business. It was a sort of, Johns, you know all about publishing, come and run this business for me. I pointed out that my experience was not in consumer magazines, but he said, "Oh, it's all the same, get on with it," sort of thing. And that's how I finished up here.
So your company serves two very different main markets, the inland waterways community and self-builders. What trends are you seeing in those markets?
Well, I guess like lots of specialist sectors, that they've changed dramatically over time, particularly in the 20-odd years that I've been involved. The waterways, and these two markets are very, very different in their nature, but that's what specialist publishing is about. The inland waterways market has moved from the early days of my involvement of one which was a real enthusiast market, a bit like steam railways and modelling and so on. And holiday makers was a big part of it. And now it's much more about boat ownership. And on the business side, you've seen a change from lots of small one-person businesses to much larger businesses with operating multiple bases, whether they're hire fleets or multiple marina bases. And self-build, well, that again has changed from being a minority interest, really, and it's still quite small in this country. About 8% of UK housing is regarded as self-build, which is not the norm. Across Europe, 30, 40%, even up to 80% in some countries is more usual. And that is now starting to change. Government policy has been introduced to encourage self-build to help meet the gap in the shortfall of housing that we're building. So a real growth sector.
You've talked a lot in the past about the need for specialist magazine publishers to analyse every aspect of their business. For example, how well cover mounts work, how well in-store promotions are working. How important is that to your own business?
It's pretty central, and I suppose it comes with my background training as an economist, where that's what I did. I analyse numbers, but not just numbers, and it's what I enjoy most about the job. That it's a blend of business, commercial, analytical skills, and creative skills. But I think any organisation that doesn't continually question what it does and what its purpose is and where it fits in the market um, is doomed. And you've got to keep questioning everything you do all the time. And the numbers behind it, the analysis of those, is the key starting point for me.
And can you tell us a bit more in today's context about how you're using data to conduct intelligent analysis of your two main markets?
Okay. Well, again, that has sort of changed from the early days where I spent a lot of time on news trade stuff. You talked about cover mounts and so on, and I would always analyse that sort of data to try and get an edge and see what was working and what wasn't. A lot of that analysis has now moved into subscriptions, particularly monitoring and assessing, analysing, working out what works best is the bottom line. And my simple mantra there is everything you do in marketing, you test continually and measure everything. If it works, do it again. If it doesn't work, don't do it again. And that's a fairly simple mantra. But I apply similar principles on from the analysis subscriptions, but that's where the numbers are biggest and most interesting to work with. But I apply that still to news trade to an extent, but also looking at advertising and events and trying to work out where the best margins are, where I can pick up early signals for what's working and what's not.
You recently relaunched the Waterways World website. Can you talk us through your thinking and objectives when it came to that?
Yeah, I mean, at a very simple level, the old website had been around for an awful long time and wasn't even responsive, and it was long overdue. We've been talking about it for quite a long time. There were plenty of ideas flying around, and we've got lots of new features that we wanted to incorporate that were just not really possible on the old platform. And becoming mobile friendly was obviously absolutely essential. Um, but again, a lot of the thinking is around the fact that our model, like many others, has moved much more towards subscriptions and away from news trade, and being able to add features that help you deliver for the individual reader became more and more important. And we've got ideas, not ideas beyond that, the plans that we're working on now to add a premium subscription product, and all of that was part of that thinking and needing a new platform.
And how much of the website is free to access and how much of it is behind a paywall?
Um, there's a fair amount. I was hoping you wouldn't answer that question because I expected to actually do a little bit of homework and come up with a percentage. There's a fair amount that's free,
Yeah,
but at the moment, what is behind the paywall is actually simply the paywall is simply if you're a postal subscriber to the magazine, you get access to various things that others don't,
right.
and that's the bit that will change. That we will introduce this premium subscription offering that will put extra content behind the paywall.
And you've also introduced a new podcast, which you can listen to via the website and presumably via other podcast platforms. Was that part of the website redesign?
Yeah, it was always planned. Again, we've been talking about it for ages. We've had a test podcast doing the rounds in the office for longer than I care to think, but certainly more than a year. And this again, it made it possible to launch that. The first one went out 2 weeks ago, and we're on to episode 2 tomorrow.
And have you had a good response to that?
Yeah, it seems to have gone down really, really well. Lots of interest, lots of feedback. Can we sustain that? Well, I hope so. We're going to try a real blend of different types of people that we interview, but people with something to say about the waterways is the essence of it. Whether that's people who are um, cruising on a regular basis, or whether they live aboard the boat, or we'll probably look at some technical subjects about boat ownership, and no doubt one or two waterways celebrities will feature on our list.
And what areas of the website redesign did you find the most challenging?
Two simple ones, really. One was search. Search was really, really important to us, and didn't want to do what quite a few sites do and fall back on Google search. We wanted our own, and getting that right was quite a technical challenge. But I think we're there now. We'll continue to make tweaks to that. And the other one, the other big challenge was integration with our own subscription service, so that we could give real live immediate access if we've got a new subscriber, we want them to have instant access. And of course the subscription um, uh, database and the web shop are on completely different platforms, and so integrating the two was a big challenge. We seem so far to have pulled them both off, and I'm very pleased with the way it's working.
So you touched on the fact that when you started out, news trade was a much more important part of your business, and that has shifted towards subscriptions. Can you talk a bit more widely about how the nature of magazine publishing has changed since you first started out in the industry?
Yes, and really, in some ways, if we'd been having this conversation 12 months ago, I'd have been saying, well, magazine publishing is not really what we're about. We're a publishing and events company, because we'd gone from live events accounting for about 5% of our revenue to well over 40%, and this year would have probably been nudging 50%. Um, uh, Compared with sort of, this is going back 12, 15 years, when news trade accounted for nearly 30% of our turnover. Now it's a small fraction. It's switched completely with events. But in terms of the publishing side, um, as we've talked already, the shift has been to delivery by subscriptions, and it's by far the dominant channel. I can remember, I suppose, when I first started, the talk was all about, oh, well, the US market is 80% subscriptions and 20% news trade. And this country was pretty much the reverse of that. Maybe not quite, but not far off it. And I just thought, well, we'll always be different. But here we are. More than 80% of my magazine circulation is now by subscription.
Well, I'll come on to the events later when we discuss how your business has been affected by recent events. But just staying with your readers for the time being, how have their behaviours changed, and what are you doing to try and keep pace with those changes?
So we've sort of touched on some of that already when I talk. Again, the two markets are really quite different. But if I talk about the
Mm.
waterways market first, there, the 20 years ago, a lot of the readers were enthusiasts who had um, grown up in a period where canals had been pretty much abandoned, were being filled in, and there was a real battle for their restoration and return to a leisure use. The waterways that were open, and there were plenty, but they were um, not the preserve, but holidaymakers was a big chunk of that market. boat ownership was growing, and that has continued, and that now has really become the dominant share of the market, and with it, the needs of the readers changes. There's and we've now got a real mix of people where we've still got some of that um, enthusiast type market who who just love every element of the waterways, want to read the history and so on. So we need to cater for those, but also an audience that is very much about owning a boat and looking after a boat, and also buying a boat. There's been a trend to people who will buy a shell of a steel narrowboat, or what we would call a sail away, which has got some of the basic work done with engines and electric systems and so on, but really to fit out the boats themselves. So we've got that. I hate to say DIY because that downplays it far too much, but people who really want to work on the boats themselves. So that's the big change in that market.
And how about self-build?
Um, yeah, I think in some ways that has changed less in terms of what people want out of it. It's still the dream of some staggering proportion, surveys show, of the population who would far prefer to create their own, build their own home. When I say build their own home, I don't mean getting their hands dirty necessarily. The majority of self-builders are really better described as project managers. They commission the work and manage the process, but it is it's been a dream for a huge portion of the population, and their needs have probably not changed dramatically. The challenges are still the same. The biggest challenge is finding a building plot to start with. Planning permission is a nightmare at times. Planning system in this country is, to use the jargon, not fit for purpose, and government have announced a radical overhaul of the system. Whether they'll get everything they want is another matter. And the third sort of stumbling block is finance, because many self builders still need a mortgage, and mainstream lenders really don't quite understand the self build market. So actually, those needs haven't really changed that much. The, where we have, I suppose, the one trend that I have seen is that more and more potential self builders have developed a real technical knowledge and thirst for understanding of technical issues, particularly around heating systems. And again, if we went back 20 years and I used the term passive house, it would be a very, very minor interest. But now it's a sort of standard of the ultimate energy efficiency. The question I get asked most at our by self builders at our events tends to be, should I go for passive house standard, which is not quite, but as energy efficient as you can possibly be. So yeah, those are the sorts of trends there.
So has sustainability become an increasing concern for your readers?
Yes, and again, probably in both markets, and that's an interesting point. There's now increasing discussion on the waterways where I guess if you went back further than my time of direct involvement, GRP cruisers was a thing, and a lot powered by outboard engines. Market moved to dominated by steel narrow boats driven by diesel engines and increasingly complex electrical systems, to now increasing interest in alternative propulsion methods of electric boating and hybrid solutions. So it's been important in waterways, and that will grow, and that will be a major change for the future. Um, Self-build market has always tended to be very focused on sustainable issues. If you're building your own home, you're likely to be there, if not for life, then for a very long time. So you tend to take a long-term view and will want to build energy efficiency into the project, partly because you've got the long term where you will get the payback. But as you sort of explore those concepts, I think people tend to think, well, it makes lots of sense for the planet as well.
So we have touched on this already, but how have your revenue streams changed over the last 10 or so years? And where do you now see the most potential for growth? I appreciate that we are in uncertain times, but what's your current thinking?
Well, exactly. The uncertain times is a big understatement. I mean, I use the same expression, and really it does understate it. It is not clear to anybody in the live events industry when we will be able to start running live events again. Um, all we can do is put them on hold. They will come back at some point. I have absolutely no doubt about that. We are looking at alternative formats for live events. Like many, we've looked at and have some plans for some virtual events in 2021. We've got the platforms developed, or working with platform providers and developing an offering there. I have little doubt that we will finish up with hybrid events that are part live, part virtual. Um, when live comes back, as I say, that's the really big question that absolutely nobody knows. And the difficulty with it is that you have long lead times to put on a large scale live event. Needs an enormous amount of preparation, and so for events next summer, you should normally be planning now. And whilst there is a certain amount of planning you can do, there comes a point where it's difficult to actually press the button and go ahead. So that makes the future really uncertain. I think news traders have sort of reached a level where, say, it can't go much lower. In a sense, it will drift a little bit lower, but it matters a lot less to the business, to my business now. I mean, there are magazine sectors where news trade is still fundamental to their business model, and will continue to be so. But that will not be the case for us. Subscriptions, I think, have enormous potential. We've had a fantastic last 6 months on magazine subscriptions, both print magazines and digital, and I expect that to continue. And that was a direct reaction to lockdown, and people having time on their hands at home has clearly changed things. I think the rise of the likes of Amazon has conditioned people to ordering something online and having it delivered to home. What's a magazine subscription, but just that? So I think that overall trend has helped us with that. That will continue. Digital will continue. I talked earlier about the premium subscription offer that we are working on introducing in the near future for Waterways World, where we can add significant value, and that will be built around a digital offering. Audio, I think, we've already talked about podcasts. That will grow. We that may well extend to audiobooks. We've always published a number of books, and I would expect that will audio will feature as a key part of that offering as well. And yeah, we will continue to look at any different format that we can to basically deliver content that our readers, whether they are interested in any aspect of the inland waterways or whether they're interested in any aspect of building their own home, which actually also goes to major renovations and conversions, that whatever somebody's whatever somebody's interest is, we can produce the content that will meet their needs. And what I'm trying to instill across our teams is that we are content first, and we're neutral on platforms, that we will deliver content via the platform that the reader wants to consume that content on, whether that's print, digital in its many, many different forms, or live events.
Would it be fair to say that you have had to rethink your strategy in response to COVID? I mean, it sounds as though, you know, you've quite quickly shifted from those events to content, as you say.
Yes, is the very simple answer. But of course, live events are about content as well,
Mm.
and it's the difficulty, of course, is that it contributes a huge chunk to your revenue and gross profits. And without it, you've got to start to fill that gap, and it takes time to fill that gap. It's not dissimilar to what happened in the financial crisis, where advertising revenue plummeted, news trade started to plummet, and you knew that there were new revenue streams, but because your revenues in your old areas were falling, it made it hard to invest in the new areas, and that's the real challenge that every publisher will face now. It's clear where we need to invest, and we're doing that as fast as we can. And the challenge is to spot the opportunities there and get them running as quickly as possible.
Yeah, definitely. So, from your experiences over the last 20 years, I mean, moving away from the current situation, what advice would you give to other specialist magazine publishers?
The In some ways that has not changed. I think content has always been king. I think understanding your market is absolutely essential. The word specialist is it sort of sums it up, and it means different things to different people. I mean, there was a time when um, an EMAP Bauer IPC. I'm showing my age now because those names are no longer around. Or a couple of them are not in these sectors. Would look at a 40, 50,000 circulation magazine as a specialist. Well, that was a very big circulation for me. But point is that specialist, you've got to be very. I think you've got to be very focused, and the number of times that I've had suggestions, oh well, if we broaden our coverage, and say in the waterways market, oh, you don't cover the Norfolk Broads. So if you put a load of pages in about the Norfolk Broads, you get people who are interested in the Norfolk Broads to read your magazine as well. Well, you might pick up some, but you would at the same time lose some of your core market who are interested in owning a steel narrowboat on the narrow canals of the, the sort of central part of the country. So you've got to be quite clear where your market is. You've got to understand where its limits are, and deliver to those readers exactly what they want. Of course, you can be too specialist, where there just isn't a market for it, or the market is so small you can't make it work. And that I think has been the downfall of many would-be specialist publishers, that they become very, very close to their subject, and because they believe in it, they assume that there's a vast market out there, and you've got to be very, very realistic about the size of your market.
Yeah. So how do you see the future of magazine publishing in general and specialist magazine publishing in particular? And what excites you about it?
Okay, well, the future, again, I'm banging on the same theme, but content is king. If you've got good content and you've got a means to reach that market, you will succeed. I think print magazines, the trend will continue that they will become almost a premium offering, and you will tend to deliver that. The delivery will be online as much as it is in print. And as a small example of that, many years ago, actually, we created a spin-off from Waterways World magazine called Narrowboat, quarterly, purely focused on history and heritage of the waterways. And it is only 48 pages plus cover, and we charge £6.99 for it. But it's produced to really high standards, and our circulation has been rock solid from day one. And but now our subscribers have access to our complete searchable archive of every article that's ever been published over the last 14 years of that magazine. And I see that as being very much the way of the future. That print magazines will still be around. They'll probably be increasingly and I'm talking specialist magazines, really. They will be a premium product, high price, but will work in tandem with an online offering.
And finally, outside of work, what do you do to relax?
Well, I suppose particularly at the moment, the big thing is simply being outdoors. That's walking, and we live in rural Derbyshire, so we've got access to some beautiful countryside. The garden is immensely important, and we've got a large garden, and we seem to be finding and creating lots of new projects this year. And the garden has never looked as good. It's also never looked as big because we keep creating new areas, and that sort of is a real challenge. But it's also a bit of an antidote to having, I say, an office-based job. The office, of course, being at home now, but being outdoors at weekends and evenings over the summer is a real antidote, and really gives me the space and the thinking time as much as anything. So absolutely love that. The second thing I would ordinarily say is following sport. Big fan in particular of athletics and rugby and cricket, and we would certainly go to watch. We're big Wasps rugby fans, and would watch them on as many occasions as we could at the Ricoh Arena in Coventry. But of course, that's now taken away from us at the moment.
Well, hopefully it will be back before too long. Peter, thank you very much for being our guest on the In Publishing podcast.
Thank you very much, Kia. Enjoyed it very much.
A big thank you again to Acorn Web Offset for sponsoring this podcast. If you're looking for a new magazine printer, then check out their website at acornweb.co.uk or contact Matt Carey on 07714 299 105 or by email at matthew.carey@acornweb.co.uk. Thank you very much to Peter for being our guest this week. You can find out more about WW Magazines at www.magazines.com, and Peter can be followed on Twitter, where his handle is @PeterMJohns. If you would like to know more about In Publishing, then check out our website, inpublishing.co.uk. Thank you for listening, and please join me next week on the In Publishing podcast.